So what do you see as far as the changes that are anticipated for next year from the USDA or FDA? What do you, any?
You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So right now, we at, I think all states are waiting for the USDA to publish the rules related to the 2018 Farm Bill that the President signed back last December. And so we've got a kind of an idea of where the USDA is going, but we're waiting on the final word. So we anticipate some changes to our program, not major changes, but there are a few things we'll have to tweak with our program. One is how we measure THC potency in fields, in hemp fields, and that's how we define hemp as hemp versus something else. And then also there's language in the 2018 Farm Bill that would require background checks that we don't do right now. We don't have any authority or I would say need to do the background checks right now, but we may be required to do those under the 2018 Farm Bill. And where they're headed with that is that anyone who's been convicted of a drug felony within the past 10 years cannot participate in the state program. We don't know the details of that yet and what it actually means. And we understand there's a grandfather clause, so if you've already been registered as a hemp grower in Oregon and you do have that type of felony conviction, that you can still continue to be a hemp grower or a processor. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
You're kind of grandfathered in.
If they were registered prior to the 18 Farm Bill being signed. Yeah. And Oregon kind of helped push for that because we haven't traditionally looked at folks' background checks and felony history.
Yeah.
You know, hemp makes strange bedfellows, and with, you know, Mitch McConnell and Kentucky kind of pushing, there's definitely an understanding of why there might be a more conservative approach. But that's what kind of got it through the legislature. ODA struggled to kind of figure out how to best fund the hemp program. I mean, it's all funding through licensure registrations. And initially, we kind of ran the program in the red. And we're now in the green. And we've tried to figure out how to make it more equitable. Currently, one farm, multiple farms, it's a $1,300 registration. And so that is changing starting in January. It'll be a flat $250 grower registration fee. And so for those growers who maybe grew last year and decide this year it's not going to be the crop for them, but they still have hemp in a barn or they have it stored someplace, under the law they have to have a registration to transfer that to a processor. And so now they would only have to pay $250 versus $1,300. And then it's an additional kind of per farm fee of $500. So if you're only growing at one location, your registration fee will drop from $1,300 to $750. But if you're growing at multiple other locations, then you would be paying a higher rate. And so that is a change that we've implemented for 2020.
Oh, cool. Well, one of the things I heard from one of the growers that I interviewed, he was like, you know, I don't get it. We got to pay to grow hemp, but the guy who grows potatoes or corn or hay or alfalfa doesn't have to pay anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Part of that's going to be that social stigma and is it hemp or marijuana, and kind of getting their foot in the door. You know, maybe in 10 or 20 years we won't be registering it. But right now, law enforcement can't tell the difference. They need to be able to know and be able to contact the department and say, is this a registered field? And you really want us to be able to say yes.
If your policy wise, if FDA, USDA comes out with they don't decide to combine Delta and testing and go to overall THC, then you'll follow suit.
Absolutely. The department is going to have whatever standard the USDA comes up with. We've put rules into place starting in January for total for pre-harvest, assuming worst case scenario. You know, and that's really frustrating and confusing for folks because the Farm Bill defines hemp as cannabis sativa with 0.3% delta 9 or less. The problem is later in the language, it talks about our state plan having a way to test post-decarboxylation or similarly reliable method. When you decarboxylate, you convert THCA to delta 9 being the intoxicating form. And so again, assuming worst case scenario, we put rules into place in May. for the upcoming season. So giving people hopefully a long time to, one, advocate with USDA if they had concerns about that, and two, start looking at the genetics and see what they might want to be growing in the 2020 season. Now, if USDA comes out with something that's less restrictive, ODA will certainly follow that, and we'll be looking at emergency rule to make sure that we're meeting those requirements.
Well, one of the things, I was talking to a couple of people yesterday, and in October you came out with one email that was saying that you're going to do total THC, and everybody panicked, freaked out. And then today you sent out an email with 30-pound test thing, and it sounds like the language for total testing is still there.
It is for post-harvest, and it has been since 2018. Those emails don't say two different things. They say the same thing in different ways. So pre-harvest testing is the plant in the field. Does it legally qualify as hemp? No more than 28 days prior to harvest. There have been rules in place since 2018 saying that everything post-harvest had to be tested the same as marijuana. And this is a legislative statute.
For Oregon? Or?
For Oregon. So our legislature passed a bill that said everything post-harvest has to be held to the same standard as marijuana. What ODA was able to do is change the 15-pound batch to 30, but it only applies basically to smokable flower. And people didn't understand that. And so we've been trying to put clarifying information out to help.
Sure. Well, and then because what I found in doing this documentary is, here all the growers are like, biomass, we're going to turn it into oil. And then all of a sudden, smokable flower.
Right.
And everybody started doing this, and then they look at the emails and the rules, and they're like, well, that's going to basically ruin our business.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing flower.
Yeah. So I think back in 2018 when the statute was passed, nobody was smoking. I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people were smoking hemp flower, right? I mean, Switzerland is looking at it as a tobacco cessation program, so it's kind of been on people's radar, but this season I think it's just taken off. And unfortunately, there is a lack of education within the hemp industry, and I think that we find there's a lot of people who probably understand the rules most of the way, and then they share information with other people, and it may or may not be completely correct. And so I always encourage people to come back to the department. I always encourage people, as boring and ridiculous as the rules and statutes are, that's the standard they're going to be held to. And so they really should be reading through those and asking for clarification if they don't understand what the requirements are.
Well,
So ODA can only do with what we're given, right? So the legislature passes bills, and then we have to write rules to implement those. And then now that the Farm Bill is in play, the USDA will be writing rules on how Oregon will have to meet those requirements for a state plan. So, as hard as it is to believe, things do actually happen when you talk to your representatives, your legislators, and those are the folks that are trickling down to what ODA does and then ultimately to what the grower does. So, if people have concerns, they need to be talking to their representatives and explaining it to them. Help educate them on how this industry does work or doesn't work. What is it that they need to make it a better industry for them?
And who are the big legislators that are behind all this?
So Wyden and Merkley at the federal level have been very active for all things hemp. I would say Rep. Wilson, all the natural ag committee folks over at the Capitol here in Oregon have played a role in this as well. So, but again, your local representative is your voice at the state and federal level.
Well, one of the big criticisms I heard yesterday was like, well, they had this closed door hearing and came up with this new story, and none of us were invited. And I said, well, maybe you guys should do what the Republicans did. Storm the hearing.
I'm not. I saw that in an email as well, and I'm not sure what they're referring to. All of ODA's meetings are public and publicized, And anybody who's registered with our program is put on our email list serve, and anybody else is welcome to sign up for that. And so when we put rules into place, we publicize that. And so the rules that went into effect in May, we had rules advisory committee meetings. Those do have certain people that are invited from the industry, various stakeholders, to sit around the table and give input to the department. And then we open it up to a public hearing once we have the draft rules. And we always publicize, we're required by law to publicize as newspapers, we send out emails, it's on our website. So I kind of struggle with where this closed door is. I think it's, again, sometimes people choose not to listen to the information when it's being made available, or they don't understand it.
I think a lot of people are confused too about, well, let's see, I'm a grower, but I'm going to take my own product and flower and trim it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm a handler.
Right.
So why can't I just grow it and then clean it up a little bit and then sell it?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And part of it, again, comes down to the definitions that we were given in statute for grower and handler. A grower can grow. Full stop. A handler receives it for processing. And so when you take it from the plant material and you trim it into pretty buds that are going to be retail ready, it goes from hemp to a hemp item. And handlers can do that processing to change it from hemp to a hemp item. What we have also discussed with folks is maybe you can get a premium for bud versus the rest of the plant material. And so just separating those is not handling. It's still raw hemp at that point. You can do that and then sell that bud or flower to somebody who's either going to process it into a high-end oil or do the further trimming to make it retail ready.
Oh, okay. So that's the sort of the, so I, as a grower, I could grow it, I could cut the colas off, put them in bins,
And sell that for a premium.
and sell that just cut.
Yep.
No trimming.
Correct.
But if someone's saying, hey, I love your crop, I'll give you so much for trim,
Right.
then you have to either get a license or bring someone in.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And we really differentiate the difference, and this has been one of those areas we've grappled with too. How do we define when you need a handler's registration, when you don't? But if you're processing that, if you're a grower and you're processing it for retail ready product, you need to have a handler's registration also, or you need to sell it to somebody who has a handler registration to do that. There are other things you can do with that crop that are not minimally processing, that are not making it retail ready, that you can do on a farm, like the drying and coarse chopping and things like that, that you don't need a processor's or a handler's registration for. So
Is that pretty clearly defined?
it's I would say it's tricky, and it's one thing we've been, like I said, we've been grappling with here, the messaging going out. So and every time we think we've got it nailed, a new unique situation comes up and someone asks us a unique question, and we've got to rethink through for their particular case. So so it's not as clear cut as maybe we would like it to be.